You're listening to the podcast of the Branch in Ashland, Virginia. Jesus came and opened his arms to those who'd been cast off in society. He welcomed them because he showed them the grace of God is based on the love of God, not on anything that they'd done or earned or deserved. In our episode today, we look at the Peanut Butter Falcon and explore the idea of community and family. Where do we find it? What do we experience there? I don't know what comes to your mind when you hear the word orphan. I grew up in the late 70s, early 80s, so whenever I heard the word orphan, there were two pictures that came to mind. They had to do with musicals too, so Oliver Twist was one of the first ones, like 19th century London, the pickpocket. And the other one was Orphan Annie, which if you're familiar with the cartoons, there are these creepy, like, no pupil eyes on it, but the musical was a lot more endearing, I think. I grew up with both. And it's funny how you get this picture in your head when you're younger, and then as you grow, as you get older, you start to have kind of take different shape and form. I began to go in faith and see the world a little bit more. I began to see that this idea of being orphaned was something much broader than, Orphan Annie and Oliver were to me, and I think you can often find that, I mean, to me, it was always specific to children, but you think about the broader thing that in our society, in our culture, people can easily be abandoned and cast off. To me, this is why I think one of the most powerful things about the church is that for those who have been told that they don't have any value, they don't have any worth, there's a place in the church, in the family of God for those people, because God says to us, it doesn't matter what anybody else tells you. You're created in my image, and so therefore you have value and worth. Regardless of what friends or family or society says, there's still a place for you. As I think back over my life, too, in many ways, I feel like the first 25 years of my life were spent kind of theorizing and putting together ideas and concepts. And then since then, it's all been about either completely reshaping those theories and ideas or throwing them away or solidifying them and realizing that there's something specific and powerful about them. And one of the things that has constantly come back to me as I've grown in my understanding of who God is, as I've grown to understand the church and who we are as the people of God, is that we're created for community and we need each other. But it's an invitation to others to come and to be part of that and to find their value and their worth there. In the beginning of the Bible, when we read through in the early chapters of Genesis, beyond creation, we know that God called the nation of Israel out from among the other nations and said that you are a people to me. And then God expanded that beyond just the children of Israel and expanded it to the Gentiles. And in the same way that God expanded that, that's what we're called to do. For those who have been orphaned, those who've been cast aside, those who have been told, hey, there's no value for you, there's no worth for you, we can invite them and say, actually, there is a place where there's value and worth that you can find. And it's in the presence of God. It's in the family of God and in his sight. The last few weeks we've been in a movie series, which we've done as summer kind of kicks off. We looked at, what did we look at? We looked at The Karate Kid last week, and we looked at Inside Out to kick off. And today we look at a film that is kind of a modern Huck Finn or Tom Sawyer film called The Peanut Butter Falcon. It's a story of a Down syndrome young man who finds himself in an unlikely or an unlikable place, having been told and kind of put in this place, and yet wanting to find family, wanting to find value, and wanting to find worth. And so we're going to watch a few clips throughout this morning, and let's watch this first one.
Zach, both you and Rosemary have lost your privileges for the week.
Oh, I don't care.
Oh, I got the solution for that. Move Rosemary in here with him and I. I can keep an eye on both of them.
Ah, that'd be great. Okay, I'll set that right up.
Okay.
Zach, this is not a joke. That's twice now. 2 times that you tried to run, and now I have to label you a flight risk. That sucks. Is this what you gave to Rosemary to convince her to pretend to be choking?
Yes, it is.
It's really creative.
Thank you.
Not just creative, it's genius. You know why? That's an advertisement for what he wants to do with the rest of his life.
Carl,
I don't know. I am young and I am not old. Carl is old and we are different. And I don't know why I am here.
I wish I had a better option for you, Zach, but I don't. You don't have a family that can provide adequate supervision for you. I know, so the state has to put you somewhere, and this just happens to be that place.
You've been here 2 years?
2.5 years.
We gotta fix that.
Just try to be good, okay? Look at me. Tell me you'll try.
Fine.
So Zach's what's called a ward of the state. And because his family has said that they can't take care of him anymore, he becomes in the custody of the state. And he finds himself in this facility, and he's not happy about it. He wants to get out. I mean, who of us ever wants to feel like we're confined to a place and we can't get out? And this whole movie starts when Zach finally is successful in escaping, because he knows there's something more than this. He feels trapped. He feels caged in. He doesn't understand why he's there. Have you ever felt like that before? Have you ever felt like you were trapped in something? Like maybe it was work, maybe it was a relationship, maybe it was something else in life where you just felt like, man, I'm stuck. I've got these walls and they're making me feel claustrophobic and I just don't know what I'm going to do. You see, we weren't meant for institution. We were meant for community. We were meant not to be cooped up, and feeling trapped and alone isn't what God intended for us. God intended for us to be able to experience his creation and experience life beyond just 4 walls of a building, especially some kind of institution. And Zach spends this whole time through this movie understanding and learning what community and what family is all about. And any of us who have spent any time in community and family know that inevitably they're the high moments, but there's also those low moments, those moments when we grow, when we have to endure difficult things together, and what happens to us through those times. How do we grow in those times? Hopefully, the experience that we have in community and family is that family sticks together. When the going get tough, the tough get going, right? And hopefully we see that happen. And we read in Proverbs 18:24, one who has unreliable friends soon comes to ruin, but there is a friend who sticks closer than a brother. Now, I've mentioned that before. Who are your hide the body friends? Right? Like the ones that you're going to call at 2 a.m. if something is troubling you, if something has happened, if there's an emergency. Who do you pick up the phone and call? Who do you text and say, hey, I really need someone. This is the person I'm going to go to. That in us is how God's created us, to need that and to be able to find that in one another. And Zach as he escapes from this place where he's at, he encounters somebody else who's kind of struggling with this idea of identity and family himself. And together, they go through a difficult and challenging journey together. And so let's watch this next clip.
Zach, I need you to listen to me. That bag and them pants are gonna hold air. They're gonna float you. Do not let go. You hold on with everything you got. I sure don't want to have to go swimming over there thinking about you sinking us. And I don't want to dredge the bottom for your body. You understand?
Tyler, am I gonna die?
Yeah, you're gonna die. It's a matter of time. That ain't the question. Question is whether they're gonna have good stories to tell about you when you're gone. Now don't be a let's go. On contact. Zach. Kick Zach! Kick Zach! Kick Zach! Let's get out of here!
That is a bigger story to tell. Oh, come on.
I love the honesty between these two. You get into those relationships where you can say anything, you're not necessarily going to tick off the other person. And Tyler's really honest with Zach. He says, the question isn't whether or not you're going to die, right? We're all going to die. So the question is, are they going to have good stories to tell about you when you're gone? And we see that that's completely in Zach's mind. And he's thinking to himself, yeah, heck, this is a great story I've got to tell now. So many of us, we get into those situations and those relationships, and it's so hard to see beyond it. We're just in the thick. All we see is the boat kind of coming at us, and we can't see what's on the other side. And even in the midst of it, even not thinking about, hey, I feel like Tyler redirects Zach, and he's thinking, oh, is this gonna be the end of me? Am I gonna die in this? He's like, no. Think about, do you have a story to tell? And I wonder how many of us feel that way. Do we have a story to tell? What's the legacy that we pass on to other people? When we're gone, what are people going to say about us? When we're not around, what do people say about us? Are we leaving a mark? And what does that mark look like to the people around us? When we're gone, do they talk behind, and whisper about us and say things? Or do they say, hey, wow, I really miss that person's presence? And I think about Paul, the Apostle Paul, who trained up others within the church and poured into them, invested in them. And one of those in particular was Timothy. And in 2 Timothy 4:7, as Paul's winding down not only his letter to Timothy, but also winding down his life. And Paul realizes, hey, you know what? I'm coming to the end of my life. And what does Paul write? He says, I've fought the fight. I fought the good fight. I've finished the race. I've kept the faith. And I wonder if we can join Paul in saying that. That as we look back and we look, and obviously all of us, we make mistakes. There's probably, a laundry list behind us of some of the things that we haven't gotten right all the time. But for the most part, can we say what Paul has said here to Timothy? That I've fought the fight and I've finished the race. And I've made a difference in the people around me. How are we marking out the difference for the people around us? Spending time together one-on-one in situations like this, going through difficult times, we will have a tendency, if we really give ourselves to those relationships that God's allowed for us, to be vulnerable with one another. We've talked here at the branch before about this idea of the 4 spaces of belonging, of public space and social space, of personal space and intimate space. And it's in our personal and intimate space that we really form bonds together with one another in our relationships. It's in personal space that we create accountability, that we're accountable to other people and other people are accountable to us. And when we go more intimately in a relationship into intimate space, then what happens there is vulnerability. We allow ourselves to be vulnerable, and we expect that other people are going to be vulnerable as well. And we share things along the way, and that's what happens between Tyler and Zach here. That as they go on this journey, as they experience near-death experiences, they begin to share with one another. They begin to open up. They begin to be vulnerable. And this is what we see in this next clip as Zach begins to really be vulnerable and share with Tyler how he's feeling. So let's watch this clip.
Well, I ain't even the slightest bit scared of you.
I want to be professional wrestler, and I am a bad guy
Why do you want to be a bad guy?
because my family left me.
That don't make you a bad guy. Good guys get left too, Zach. Ain't about no silly laugh or wearing black and eyeshadow and shit. Ain't nothing to do with that. It has to do with what's in here, in your heart. You got a good guy heart. You can't do shit about it. That's just who you are. What's that? Who told you that?
Coach, teachers,
Your coach? What'd your coach say?
I am retarded.
Your coach said that? Holy coach. Your team ever win anything? No? Something you ain't never gonna do. That's alright. You can't be everything. You ain't gonna be no professional basketball player. You ain't gonna dunk no basketball or be an Olympic swimmer like a stone. Muscle. Muscle sinks. Today when you pulled me up out the water, you almost pulled my whole arm out the socket. Most grown folk I know ain't got that kind of strength. You're strong, Zach. Your coach.
How many times have we heard voices or things from others determined what our value and worth is? You think about what is a bad guy. Why? Because that's what people have told. Because that's what people have put. We're looking to find our value and our worth in our culture and the people around us and our relationships, then we're looking in the wrong place. In the creation account in Genesis 1, we're told why every single person is valuable. In Genesis 1:27, it says, "So God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them." If you hear nothing else today, hear this. We are valuable. You are valuable because God created you in his image. That's why we have value. It's not because a coach or a teacher has told us that there's something wrong with us or there's something right with us. It has nothing to do with the people around us and what those people say, but it has everything to do with the fact that God said in the beginning when he created that I'm going to create you in his image. And all of creation, nothing else has that same value. Nothing else has that value because nothing else has been created in God's own image. You know, if I see this anywhere, I see this as a parent with my kids. The number of times that one of them has come home from school and you can tell that they're upset about something, and a lot of times it's because somebody said something about them that was just not true. Somebody assigned worth or value to them based on something that we shouldn't be assigning value and worth to. You know, what's wrong with your nose? What's wrong with your clothes? What's wrong with your teeth? What's wrong with your car? You know, your dad's old or whatever it is. And if we're not careful, we'll listen to the wrong voices. And we'll start assigning ourselves worth, or we'll start believing what those voices have said. That you're not worthwhile because they said it. Who are they? They're not God. God looks at us and he says, I created you in my image, and that's why you're valuable. That's why you have worth. You don't need to listen to those other people. And yeah, we need to be careful what we listen to and who we listen to, but we also need to be careful, especially as ones who understand how we've been created, of what value we're assigning to other people. You know, what are the words that we say to the people around us? What are we saying to them that they're saying, based on what you're telling me, I'm going to assign value and worth to myself? You know, even though we're not supposed to be doing that, let's face it, all of us have that tendency to do that. What are we saying to the people around us? How are we encouraging them? If their value and worth were based on what we say to them, what we're assigning to them with our words, how valuable and worthwhile would they feel? You know, the writer to the early Hebrews in Hebrews 3:13 said, encourage one another daily as it is called today, so that none of you may be hardened by sin's deceitfulness. How are we building others up or tearing them down with our words? You know, how are we helping people to see their value and worth, not in the eyes of everybody around us, trying to reach and match and do all kinds of things, but based upon the fact that they have been created in the image of God? How are we speaking into someone's true identity in what we say to them? You know, Zach, throughout this film, is pursuing this dream of meeting his hero, who's a wrestler named the Saltwater Redneck. And he's followed him for years. He's been wearing out these videotapes, watching them over and over again. And you know the old story about never meet your heroes, right? It looks like things aren't going to turn out as expected, but Zach's still trying to get everybody to see things differently, and he begins to see things differently. The three main characters that we follow throughout this movie are ones who have experienced significant loss in relationships and in life. You know, Zach's been abandoned. He's been cast away. And his family said, we can't take care of you, and so you're a ward of the state now, and you have to be in this facility. Tyler, we find out through some flashbacks in the film, he has had a major loss himself, and a loss that maybe he actually had something to do with. And so he's dealing with that loss and the grief of that. And even Eleanor, she's lost her husband. And so all of them have experienced some significant loss in their lives. And they're trying to understand how to kind of put the pieces back together again. They're looking to find family. They're looking to find community and connection. If our nuclear families don't provide that for us, where do we find it? I've heard people say that, friends are the family you can choose, right? And we might say the same thing with the community of God, with the church, that we may have been disappointed in our lives. Maybe our families cast us out and they said, you're worthless, you're no good. But in God's eyes, we have value and worth, and we can find that community, that connection, that family together with one another. And Zach comes to a place, and he's trying to convince both Tyler and Eleanor that they need to rethink this idea of family. They need to see it differently. And that's what he does in this last clip.
He's not real, Zach.
I did saw like 1,000 movies of him.
Zach, I don't think we're gonna find him. I think it's time for us to go back now.
I don't want to go back. Tyler told me this, and he lied to me, and he promised me. And I don't want to go back. I want to stay here.
We can't, Zach. We have lives to go back to.
Eleanor, I am strong enough. And I could catch a fish for you, and I could be a hero. And I could take care of you. We could be a family.
We could be a family. Not just with our value and worth, but sometimes we need to rethink what we understand, our understanding of things. Because somehow or another we've gotten either an unhealthy understanding of it. And for Zach, he's trying to convince them that, hey, maybe family looks different. Maybe family doesn't look like what we thought. We've all been disappointed or abandoned or we've lost our family. And so what becomes your family there? What does family look like? This is a moment in Matthew's gospel and in the Bible where Jesus is approached about his family. And in Matthew chapter 12, verses 48 through 50, Jesus is asked about his family, and this is what he says. He says, "Who is my mother and who are my brothers?" He said, "Here are my mother and my brothers, for whoever does Jesus looked at the people around him and he said, you know what? My family are the ones who are in this with me. Who say, hey, you know what? We want to do the will of God. And whoever's doing that with me, whoever's on this mission of God with me, that's my family. So family may look different. We may have been abandoned. We may have lost our family, but are we still finding it somewhere? Can we find it? Can you think about times in your own life where you've invited people into family gatherings? I remember when I was younger and, if I was dating someone, it was always like, this was the litmus test. When you bring them into the craziness of family and you're like, if you survive this, then you can survive anything, right? And some of you are like, amen, I totally get that, right? Some of you have like mellow families and it's not a big deal, but my family was not like that. If we, the way that my dad and my brother and I sang happy birthday together, if anyone could endure that, then they could endure pretty much everything. Sometimes we're a little afraid of what people are going to think when they see what our family looks like. And I think that happens with us in the church sometimes. That we're like, man, my family, we're a messed up bunch. But that's why we need Jesus. That's why we're together. That's why we're a community of faith, because we say, hey, I don't have it all together. I have been marginalized or cast off or thrown away. And guess what? I've found my value. I've found my worth in the eyes of God. And I've found my family together with those who say, hey, I'm committed to this. I want to be on mission with God together. The church should feel like a family. We should feel like we're connecting with one another. Not everyone all the time intimately and deeply, but we should be able to find those personal and those intimate connections there among others who are saying, hey, I want to do this. I want to be part of God's mission together. The call to community is a call that we were made for, and when we live into it, we're living into God's original intent for us. We're living into our value and worth because we're not living based upon what anyone else is saying other than what God is saying to us. And so what do we do with all this? What are some principles and questions that we can take with us from here? Ask yourself, what's your legacy? What are you leaving behind? Hopefully none of us all of us will be here next week and the week after that, but what impact are we making to the people around us? The people who are close, the people who are a little bit further off, what do they see in us? And then are we building others up or are we tearing them down? I have to ask myself that all the time. How am I doing in my encouragement with one another? As someone who isn't always great at encouraging people, I have to work harder at doing that. Maybe we all do. But are we encouraging people? Are we lifting them up? Are we tearing them down? Are we pointing them to their value in who God created them to be? Or are we pointing them to their value in what other people are saying about them? And then how are we connecting to family? How are we seeing that play out? How are we experiencing that together? That when we go through difficult things that we feel connected to one another, or do we feel alone? Do we feel like there's a deep connection with somebody who, if we weren't there, if we missed something, if something was happening in our lives, that they would reach out? So often I've seen that in the church that people have this expectation that oh, well, everyone should love me, everyone should care for me. And my first question always is, well, are you caring and loving for others? Because it's going to come back to you when you do. And those people who I've found to be the most giving and loving in their relationships are the ones that the moment that things happen, that they're in struggles and trials, people reach out to them. And it's because they've let themselves be vulnerable a little bit. And they've also loved well. And I wonder, how are we loving each other well? Together. Not just here, but how are we extending that beyond those people who are part of the branch? How are we extending that to neighbors, to coworkers, to other people around us? It's not confined to just those people we like either, or those people who it's easy for. We should be loving others around us so that they also can see their value and worth in the eyes of God. Let me pray for us. God, thanks for the gift of story that allows us to see and know your truth and to learn things from it. And I pray, God, that you would help us to be mindful of the legacy that we leave, that we're being mindful of how we are encouraging one another and how we're connecting with one another. And so, Father, I pray that you would just use us as your body, as your hands and feet. That, God, for those who we encounter, especially who have lost their value, who don't see their value, that, God, we would point them to you and say, yes, you are valuable. Yes, you are worth something in the eyes of the one who created you. And so, Father, I pray that you would take what we have, the gifts that you've given us, and that, God, you would use those gifts for those who are around us. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen. How are we welcoming others into the community that we've found in God? Are we encouraging others to find their value and worth in the fact that they've been created in the image of God? We were created for community. Let's find ways to invite others to experience that community. The community that only comes from knowing the God of the universe who created us, saves us, loves us, and adopts us into his family. Thanks for listening to our podcast. If you have any questions or comments, please email us at thebranchashland@gmail.com. If you like what you heard, please subscribe, give us a review, and share with your friends and family. Thanks for listening. See you next time.